So, Carl, as an extra special bonus Royal Rumble segment 3, we're going to do the Rumble Rewind, right? And this has actually been a request, which is the first time I think we've had a request. And do you know what? Rightly so, because this is something that you've already previously cited as your favourite Royal Rumble. So why the fuck shouldn't we talk about it? And it's perfect because it was a Rumble up until quite recently, I'm ashamed to admit, I'd never watched. So it just worked perfectly. So what we're talking about is 1992's Royal Rumble. And we're going to run through that like we do this week in wrestling, but hopefully it'll be fun. Joking. So, should we talk about the card we had for this night, Carl?
I think we should.
And I think after I do the card, that's going to be one of the first things I want to ask you about. And so the card, as it went for that night, Carl, we had the new foundation being... Sorry, it was Brett and what's his name?
It was Owen and Jim.
Owen and Jim.
the
Sorry,
Neidhart.
Going up against the Orient Express with the new foundation taking the win. We had the IC title on the line with the Mountie going up against Rowdy Roddy Piper, with Rowdy Roddy Piper taking the win and winning the championship at the time, as he was not the one defending. We had the Bushwhackers going up against the Beverly Brothers. Okay. With the Beverly Brothers taking the win. We saw the tag titles on the line with the Legion of Doom going up against the Natural Disasters, which ended in a no contest. Because even back in 92, WWE would like to do that. And then we ended with the Royal Rumble match itself, with the winner ultimately being Ric Flair. Now, there's a lot to talk about in terms of how that winner came about. There's a lot of story to that. But the first thing I want to ask you about, Carl, is for me watching this fairly recently, this seemed like a really stacked card. Like, I'm looking at like Owen's a ledge, probably the lesser sort of popular of the Hart Foundation, but Jim the Anvil was a ledge. The Orient Express were legends. Rowdy Roddy Piper, definitely. The Mountie, so well known. We had the Bushwhackers. I mean, in all honesty, I didn't really know much of the Beverly Brothers, but okay. We had the Legion of Doom going against the Natural Disaster, two absolutely awesome tag teams. And then we had the Royal Rumble itself with just so many fucking stars in it, so many stars that I'm looking at it now going, fuck, this is just totally stacked. But then the thing I wanted to ask you about, the first thing I wanted to talk about was, did it feel that way back when a lot of these stars weren't like legends as we know them now? Because I'm looking at like, these are all like Hall of Fame fucking legends, but of course they are. Do you know what I mean? So did it feel so impactful and such a big star-powered card at the time?
Honestly, no. So you had obviously like the Intercontinental Title match, the Mountie and Piper. That felt like that was a big match. So I'm not too sure what happened with Brett around this time. So Brett was the IC champion, and he lost it like days before the Rumble. He said he had a cold or something, and basically the Mountie took advantage of it and managed to score a quick pin. And Piper was trying to avenge his his friend's loss kind of thing, and that's how this kind of feud came about. But I remember I was really excited for Piper and the Mountie. Obviously Legion of Doom and Natural Disasters, that was like a colossal match of two of the best tag teams. But then Bushwhackers and Beverly Brothers, I didn't really care about. And New Foundation were really good.
I mean, it's one of them where I look at that now, the Bushwhackers side of it, and go, well, we know the Bushwhackers, and all right, they're not like the biggest tag team ever, but they're well known, they're legends in their own right. The Beverly Brothers, like, you might be able to give a bit of context on that, but they weren't ones that I'd heard of a great deal, in all honesty. So they were probably the weakest ones on this card for me.
Yeah, do you know what? They were a good little team. Like, they had a really devastating, like, if you've not seen their finish, they didn't hit it in like, this is how bad the match is. I mean, we'll go through each of the matches in a minute. But like, they won this match with a double axe handle off the rope, and it was like, wow, that's just a standard move anybody would pull today. But like, they had a devastating finisher move, which you've got to go and check it out if you haven't seen it. Like, they must have nearly killed several people with this thing. Like, they literally lift them up and spike the person's head into the floor. It was dangerous.
Did you put a video up of this the other day saying about American football?
So a guy on our Instagram that we follow would put it up, and I'd commented on it. That was the Beverly Brothers.
Right, sorry, I believe I knew I saw it quite recently, so that's their finisher.
Yeah. because yeah, that was horrendous. But so they were pretty good. They had pretty cool music. Having the Genius as their manager was good. But yeah, it was kind of like they were one of them. Like they should have been better than they probably were, but they just kind of fizzled out, unfortunately. But no, in terms of like the card itself, the bulk of the star power was in the Rumble, and that's one of the reasons that makes it one of the best Rumbles, really, when you look at. So obviously it was hard to fill an undercard with people and still make it seem like a really good kind of strong Rumble. So
Thing is, though, in all fairness, I know it must have been hard, and again, this might be me looking at it through different eyes than you may have at the time, but it wasn't a bad little card before it. And this might be a modern day me looking at it, but the only bit that I would have been like, and I felt like that was a little bit stupid, was the no contest for the natural disasters and Legion of Doom, because it's a bit like these were two like awesome tag teams, and the natural disasters are fucking behemoths. This should have been a banger of a match, and we end in this kind of a screwy way. And this is me. This is like a modern day problem. I really have a pet peeve of screwy finishes, and they seem to put one in every week. So maybe I'm a bit jaded on that, but that felt like a bit of a miss. But otherwise, I mean, there's some good solid matches there, really.
Well, I mean, if we go through it match by match, so the first match we had, obviously that opened the show, was the New Foundation and the Orient Express. So in terms of the New Foundation, so you'd had Owen Hart, basically they'd split Bret off from Jim the Anvil. So we had the Hart Foundation, years ago, which was Bret Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. They were like the tag team. You also had Owen Hart doing his kind of, I think they were called something like High Energy or something, but it was Owen Hart and Coco Beware. They were the tag team. And then basically they put Jim together with Owen when they kind of let Bret go on a singles run, and that was where the New Foundation kind of thing came from. The Orient Express weren't really around that much in the WWE. They were quite well known outside, but like they didn't have the longest of stints. But looking back at this match, it was a fucking really good match, and I think the thing that jumped out, and it's easy to say with hindsight and stuff, isn't it? But it showed even back then how good Owen Hart was. Like he was phenomenal in this match. He just did stuff which people just didn't do. Do you know what I mean? And it was like a run up the turnbuckle with a moonsault off to get behind his opponent, and like bouncing off the ropes and stuff like that. He was so good.
I think, to be honest, that's probably kind of the saddening thing about it, is that when you do watch it back, you can see that he was gonna be big.
Oh God, yeah.
You know what I mean? And it just points out just how tragic that was, really.
By all accounts, he it's such a fucking shame, like the way that he died. He had the blue blazer character and stuff like that. But he was gonna get the gimmick of the game. So that was gonna go to Owen before it went to Triple H.
God, I didn't know that. That's crazy.
So it's such a shame that, because effectively what happened was he was doing pretty decent stuff. He had the blue blazer character way back when as sort of like punishment a little bit for the Bret Hart like Montreal shit, effectively. So they give him it back again. But yeah, like the plan was always going to be that he was going to transition away from that and go into have the game gimmick and stuff. So it's horrible that they put him back doing that, really. But anyway, his talent, his in-ring work was just stellar, and you can see from the WrestleMania 10 match that he had with Bret, like them two, they were on par. If anything, like some people think Owen's better than Bret, some people think Bret is just slightly better than Owen, but they were two fantastic wrestlers, whichever way you look at it. And
that's the thing.
I just think his
they're always gonna have their individual favorites, but you can't argue that they were both fucking good in the ring.
And I think his style as well, like obviously you could tell he'd been to Japan, and he'd done stuff in Canada and he'd done stuff elsewhere, and he brought something to the WWF which wasn't really there at the time. And Jim the Anvil was just a fucking beast, wasn't he? Do you know what I mean? So like they played off each other quite well. I think, to be fair, and I really like the Hart Foundation, but I think this New Foundation, they probably had better chemistry in a sense, because like Owen was doing a lot more flippy type stuff, and Anvil was more just like a heavy hitter, so like they probably complemented each other more. But yeah, I thought this was like a solid opening contest for the pay-per-view, I thought. And I watched it back the other day, and I just like, God, he was so good, Owen. It is such a shame.
It really is, mate.
But then the next match, the second match of the night, the Intercontinental Title, and before that match, how good of a promo was Piper? Like, my God.
Piper, his character work was insane. To be fair, he was one of the best talkers in the fucking business.
I'm constantly blown away by his like abilities on the microphone, and this promo was was just no different. Like, even like the way he just like changed his voice and stuff like that, he was just like, "Wow, we got a little thing going on," and then he'd go onto it and he'd be like, "I think someone's dreaming. It's been all wet too." And Mean Gene's just like looking at him like, "Okay, back to you." It's just, you know what I mean. It was so off the cuff and it was so good. But it was a
Yeah,
fantastic little promo, I thought, before. You know, to be fair to the Mountie, his was decent as well, and obviously he had Mouth of the South as his mouthpiece as well. But the match itself, I thought, was fantastic as well, and obviously this was Piper capturing his first singles gold. I think,
see, I didn't know that. It's an interesting
yeah,
tidbit. That
I mean, Piper is just one of them. He definitely never gets enough credit. I don't think he doesn't get the credit he deserves because he was the biggest villain in pro wrestling like a few years prior to this. Like, it was him and Mr. Wonderful against Mr. T and Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania, at WrestleMania. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah,
like, he was the money heel and he was hated by people, and then for him to be able to turn that around and be such a lovable baby face, and have people behind him and stuff like that, it was just a testament to him. But I thought the match,
oh
like,
yeah,
what did you
without a
think of the
doubt.
actual match style itself? Because it was a very different type of match, I suppose, to the first one, because it was a little bit more kind of messy and scuffly and stuff like that.
I think, to be honest, it's kind of the type of thing I suppose I expected with
Mm,
Piper, if you know what I mean. Like, and not to coin a phrase that the WWE love to use now, but a bit grittier than your technical sort of. I don't want to say high flying is probably not the right word, but like you say, the Owen style, that Japan style. It was definitely not going to be that, but I think it really it makes sense to the characters and who they are, and definitely to Piper. I must admit, I don't know or didn't know the Mountie all that well, but the whole match itself worked really
mm,
well for me, in all fairness. And like you say, I think it was probably the right call to have it this order. Not that they ever discussed having it this order. I don't think you'd open with an IC title match, but in terms of the energy in those matches, and I'm by no means saying this was a lazy match, but I think it was the right call to sort of change the pace at this point anyway, to be fair. So I think it worked really well.
yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think it's nice that even he'd won the belt and stuff like that, and then he still managed to get him with the cattle prod and stuff like that, and just because even though he was a good guy, like, he could still get away with stuff like that because he was Piper one.
Yeah, well, that's sort of, again, I don't know if it's technically the right way of putting it, but it's that sort of tweener thing, isn't it, where you can do heelish things, but
Yeah,
you're loved for
yeah,
it.
definitely. And then the next one obviously was the Bushwhackers and the Beverly Brothers, but this wasn't good. It wasn't a great match, and
Well, I mean, it's interesting you say about like the way it finished with the double axe handle. Like they didn't hit that savage finisher because I probably would have reacted to that if
yeah,
you know what I mean. Like I didn't really know the Beverly Brothers. I've seen the Bushwhackers. I get their idea, um, you know, but none of the. This was probably this wasn't a big star match for
no,
me. Like these are, like I'd heard of the Bushwhackers, not so much the Beverly Brothers. So like in terms of like interest, I suppose. And I don't want to be unfair. So in terms of interest, this is probably the least interesting for me
mhm,
going in. And I, by no means was it a bad match, but like you say, I suppose it feels like they probably could have done more with it. Correct me if I'm wrong,
yeah.
Carl, because obviously you're a product of that
I
time.
think it was a weird time. So for me, this match was centered more around some weird little rivalry going on with the Genius, who was the manager of the Beverly Brothers, and then this guy called Jameson,
Mm.
who the Bushwhackers had as their manager for a little bit. But yeah, he was just like this weird nerd character, and the Genius was kind of like, well, you're stupid and I'm smart, and it seemed to be more around like built around them than it was between animosity between the two teams. So it didn't feel like a
Mm.
pay-per-view match, and I still feel like it probably didn't
Yeah,
belong on the card.
yeah. I think that's probably the right way of
Mm.
putting it. It wasn't a pay per view match. This is the kind of thing you mess around with on like a Raw or
Yeah,
something like that.
so I think
Yeah, to be on the Rumble, one of the big four pay per views as well, does feel a little
yeah.
bit odd. I mean, they can't all be winners,
Well,
but
that's it. I
yeah,
feel like
I
this
take your
was like
points.
probably the only dark spot in a bright card really. Um, and then I think
Oh
you
yeah.
alluded to it before as well, but the next match, then the final match ahead of the Rumble, was the tag titles on the line. And obviously you've got Legion of Doom, who were fucking big, massive, muscly fucking, monsters, going up against big fucking like heavy monsters in the natural disasters. You know what I mean? And on paper, I was so looking
Yeah.
forward to this match because if you think about the tag teams back in the day, like back then, you had obviously the money match to make was always Legion of Doom versus Demolition. They were like the two red hot teams. But like when
Yeah.
Earthquake got together with well, he was Tugboat, and then he went to Typhoon, and when they formed as Natural Disasters, it was like, holy shit, these guys are like,
I know, right?
like you don't want to fight them. And it's just a shame because obviously, as you said, it kind of it ended in like a count out, and then
Sorry, just before we continue, Fred, if you're listening, you know, I know you don't do the texty text all too much, but you're welcome on the show
you do
anytime,
say
Fred.
this,
Just
like
throwing it out there.
we
Anytime.
know based on like the likes and everything like that and the comments that you know about us and you know that we want to get you on the
You
show. So
interact.
come on, Fred. What's it gonna take?
Do it.
Um,
So quote Ben Stiller,
do it,
do it.
do it. Um,
Sorry, I just had to digress because it mind. Damn
no,
you, Shockmaster.
absolutely. It's a very fair call out. But yeah, I don't know. It's a shame because this could have been great on paper. I don't know whether it was like they ran out of time or what because it felt a bit rushed. It felt a bit messy, and then you had the whole Mouth of the South was trying to say that they were the champions, but obviously you can't lose the belts on a count out. So it was just a bit, yeah, just a bit of a mess, unfortunately. They went on to have better matches after that, but it was just, yeah, just a bit of a shame that it didn't play out the best it could have done.
No, I agree. It is good because I believe this was a title match as well,
It
wasn't it?
was, yeah.
So I feel like the screwy finish was like one of them things with WWE probably, and I don't know if they did this back then, but it certainly feels like a modern day thing where they're like, well, we don't want to ruin any characters here by them taking the loss, so we're just gonna fuck around.
Well, exactly. It was basically,
And I'm always, and I say it now, and I said it back then, don't book the fucking match then.
I mean, it
So,
was probably exactly that. They probably didn't want to kind of dethrone Legion of Doom, but at the same time, they had a super hot tag team on the hands in the Natural Disasters who were coming up as like these guys are going to be champions. So yeah, it was probably just a case of protecting everybody, unfortunately. But yeah, it was what we got to see was still pretty good though. But then we went on
oh yeah,
to the Rumble, Anthony, and
oh the
tell me
Rumble,
all about it. I want to
and I
know
think
everything.
this this must be what makes this your favorite Royal Rumble
Oh
ever. To
God,
be
yeah.
fair though, right? Because correct me, I might get some of the details wrong here, Carl. But we had, I believe, Ric Flair entered at number 3.
Yeah, he did. So it started off
Yep.
with British
So
Bulldog came out number one. Then you had Ted DiBiase number two. So if you the first three entrants, Anthony, was Bulldog, Ted DiBiase, and Ric Flair. Like fucking
the only thing I will say though, like, and this is probably just because of the affinity we have for Bulldog and how recently we've been talking about him and to Georgia about him, was I would have hoped he'd have been in the Royal Rumble
mm,
longer, but you know, people have to be eliminated and these things happen, and that's just me watching it right now. Like, it's a British Bulldog, but fair enough. He was eliminated when he was, and quite quickly. But here we are. Um, I think the first thing, obviously, is, and I've been doing a little bit of reading on this, is the fact that am I right in saying Ric Flair is one of the only ones, or maybe even the only one, to enter so early and actually go on to win?
so
Am I right in saying this, or have we had other people since?
so at this time in '92, no one who drew the numbers 1 through 5 had ever been there in the end. Was kind of the quote. So I don't know whether anybody had won it at number
Yeah.
6 or whatever, but that was kind of what was
Mm.
quoted at the time. So since then, obviously, we've had you know two people win it at number one, one of which was Chris Benoit. Not
Oh
the
yeah.
other guy. Because why not?
Oh
But
fucking yeah.
yeah, so obviously we've had people win it at number one since, and I think Rey Mysterio won it at number two and stuff like that. Um, but
Right.
obviously,
But it was a massive deal at the
yeah.
time.
Well, that
Like,
was
even though
it.
we've
And
overdone it a little bit now,
I
I
think,
suppose.
and
But
it's something that I'll be talking about probably all the way through this, is how stellar the commentary work was. So obviously you had the commentary team was Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan, and Bobby Heenan was fucking like Ric Flair's, like he was obsessed with Ric Flair basically, and wasn't really his manager as such. Yeah, he
he
sort of
just
was a
loved
little
him.
bit, but at the same time wasn't. And then you had Perfect, who was kind of playing coach character almost. But they were just like this fucking trifecta of awesomeness. And the commentary when he came out at number 3, like Monsoon was just like, "Well, you got no chance now," and Heenan just goes deadly silent, and he's just like, "No, no, God, no, no," and he's just like fuming that Ric Flair's come out at number 3 because he thinks he hasn't got a chance of winning it. It's just so good.
Yeah, I must say, I think this is probably the most story work I've ever seen in a Rumble. Do you know what I mean? And like you say, it's probably down to the commentary work, but you had that whole, like, they really sold the disbelief that Rick could win it because of how early he come in. You had everything that went on with Sid and Hogan. You know, they sort of built the finish really well, and it's not something you see very often in a Rumble. A Rumble's normally a bit of a very enjoyable mess normally. Like, but this was like almost plotted out perfectly in a way, and I don't think I've ever seen that.
No,
And that's a bit
and I
insane,
think,
really.
you know, like from a commentary perspective as well, like that's what made it so entertaining was the fact that Flair entered at number 3, and you've just got Bobby the Brain Heenan having several heart attacks all the way through the whole Rumble, just shitting his pants that he's
No,
going to be eliminated.
the commentary was definitely awesome. To be fair, like I wish commentary was that enthusiastic about things
Like
right
for
now.
me,
Could you ever imagine like the likes of Michael Cole and that being so enthused about a
no,
match?
well, definitely not. No, and it'd just be catchphrases, buzzwords, and stuff like these two, Heenan and
Or they're trying to convince you of someone's nickname. He's the freak, the
yeah.
freak, the
Well, it's
freak.
like Heenan and Monsoon just bounced off each other so well, and they were just so funny,
Mm.
and like they had their own kind of characters and stuff like that as well, and like because you knew that Heenan was like a proper Ric Flair fanboy, and they rooted for people. It wasn't just call it down the middle all the time and stuff. So
Yeah. Out of curiosity, did they work together a lot?
um,
I know they were obviously commentating together at the
yeah,
Rumble,
it
but
was a good couple of years that they worked together, and then Heenan ended up going down to WCW, I think, in the end, which was obviously ended up breaking up that little partnership, which was a shame. But yeah, it was just lines like it's stuff that like we quote all the time, like this is when my dad was into wrestling as well, and there was like we still lose it whenever we watch it now when because basically Roddy Piper comes in. Obviously, he's just won the Intercontinental title. He wants both titles. He comes in, and him and Flair have got some beef. And Heenan's like, God, no, anybody but him, no, no. And like Piper comes in and starts wailing on Ric Flair, so Heenan's shitting himself. And then Jake the Snake comes in slightly later on, and Jake the Snake is about to get Flair set for a DDT, and Piper clotheslines him and saves him. And then all the time, Heenan on commentary is like, oh yeah, you wear a skirt and all this kind of stuff, and he's like, I never thought I'd say this, Roddy, but I'm sorry. It's a kilt. It's not a skirt. It's a kilt. And then the next minute, Piper turns on Flair again, and he goes, "You no good cheat, you skirt wearing freak." It was just, like, honestly, just so funny. It made the whole thing for me. The commentary as well.
yeah, I
It's
agree.
just Ric Flair's
That's
ascension.
something that we probably should talk about in the future. Is like um, best
Mm,
commentary team, because straight away in my mind I go to JR and King just because that was sort of essentially my childhood
yeah.
commentating team. I mean, I throw Taz in the mix a little bit too, but like to be fair, like the enthusiasm in these guys, it almost makes me wish I'd have been watching it
Yeah.
back then. It's something I don't think like. Yeah, I don't want to be unfair, but I don't think I ever saw that. Maybe King. King was like he was quite an animated character
Mm.
on commentary, to be fair, but I don't know. It's yeah, they were at a different
No,
level for me.
I feel like there was an art to commentary. It was like, it was less around, oh, we better make sure we say this, that, and the other. It was like really just getting you believing in the characters and in the match, and that it could go this way or that way and that kind of thing. And those guys were just the best to do it, I think. But
Yeah,
um,
and all you get in the modern day is like people saying the wrong moves, saying the wrong name characters, telling you that the show is sponsored by Geico, and then cracking on with the day. It's just not the same.
I love it. But then we also got, which I thought was hilarious as well, and maybe could have been one of the things we spoke about as a potential botch, because by all accounts it was a botch. But there was a little, again, talking about the little storylines that were running through the Rumble. we'd had some previous beef with Randy Savage and Jake the Snake, to the point where Jake the Snake was trying to get Savage's wife with Damien as Snake. So Savage obviously took umbrage to that. And anyway, Jake the Snake legged it as soon as Savage came down. He was looking for him, whatever. And then when he finally managed to get his hands on him, he eliminated Jake the Snake, but then jumped over the top rope to like land on him, and then eliminated himself in the process. And the commentary team were like, "That wasn't very smart."
Right. So, do you think that was a botch? Because I honestly thought that
No, it
was
was
part of
complete
it.
botch, because then like they allowed him.
So he's just sort of reacted.
So he's just like,
I'll do that
I'm
next.
gonna jump over the ropes on him, and then like the commentary team were like, "Shit!" And then like he went back in, and then the commentary team tried to save it, and they were like, "Oh, that's what it was. It's because someone didn't throw him over. He threw himself out, and I think the rules say somewhere that you've got to be thrown out, and they just made it up." And he just got back in, but it's just like, what a dick! Just completely eliminate himself. It's hilarious.
That's crazy.
But yeah. So obviously we had that, and then I think that we got the final six of again how kind of star-studded it was, and you think of all the people who had already been eliminated by this point, but the final six was Piper, was Flair, Hogan, Sid, Rick Martel, and
have you mentioned Savage as well?
Yeah, because Savage got back in, didn't he?
Savage.
So,
of course it is.
So otherwise he wouldn't have been in there. But yeah, so that was kind of our final six, and then basically Sid ends up eliminating both Savage and Martel, and they go out. So then we're left with Sid, Hogan, Piper, and Flair. Piper goes out next, and then that's where the kind of breakdown of friendship, because at this point Sid and Hogan were kind of friends, supposedly, and then basically Sid ends up turning on Hogan and eliminates him, and obviously Hogan being being the sore loser that he is like, fuming, like, how could my friend do this to me? And he doesn't just go, oh, he basically grabs hold of Sid's arm and tries to pull him out, and then Flair just gets behind and eliminates him. So.
And then we see Flair winning it. Now, can I ask? Because I don't know, right? I didn't notice anything when I watched it, but I've read, and you might know from way back, I've read that the crowd cheered, cheered a fucking lot when Hogan was eliminated, but that wasn't the plan. So they actually edited the cheers out because it was meant to be a betrayal, and we weren't meant to cheer for Hogan being eliminated. Is that true?
So it was a mixed reaction. So you had a lot of people kind of like celebrating, like, yes. You had a lot of people with like, oh, like heads in their hands, couldn't believe it. So it was a lot more mixed than they probably was expecting, because obviously Hogan was the guy, wasn't
he? Yeah. No, I weren't sure because I don't think it was like, certainly when I watched it, it wasn't. I don't know if it was edited, but it didn't feel like the audience were like, yes, he's fucking gone. We're so made up. Like they were so happy that Hogan was gone. But what I've read on the internet afterwards was suggesting that like they were super enthused, and to the point that two things I'd read that I'm curious whether it's true was that the audience were like well overzealous, and that was edited down. And the second one was that the commentator said that it like made some sort of and I don't know which one of them it was. I don't know if it was Ian or not, but that they suggested that like the elimination was completely fair, etc. And they actually got them to redo that audio where they were like pissed off that Hogan was eliminated. And again, two that I don't know whether they're true, because nothing felt unnatural when I watched it. But I'm like, did these things happen? Did they really do this whole conspiracy thing of like, we can't have people thinking Hogan's like dislikable, unlikable, even words?
Well, I mean, do you know what? I'm really interested to see whether they did edit that over, or did some kind of re-recording or something. But I think you can see like in the fans. I don't know whether they changed the audio or something, but you can see a lot of them kind of put their arms up like and kind of cheer. But a lot of them are kind of like, head in the hands, kind of upset and shocked as well. So it's definitely a mixed
Yeah,
reaction.
shocked. Yeah.
But obviously,
Yeah.
you've got to think Hogan was, the Charlotte Flair of his generation. Like he was forced down everybody's
Yeah,
throats.
got to put Hogan in it.
He'd been the top guy since like fucking 86 or something. Do you know what I mean? It was like 92 by this point, and he was kind of his star was starting to be on there.
Yeah, they were like, so there was a fair chunk of the audience who were ready for a
Yeah,
change.
definitely.
Like,
And they got Ric Flair, who was the biggest star outside of WWF all them years. NWA and stuff like that. He was the other guy, and it was finally Ric Flair's time to be the champion in the WWF, which people thought would never happen. So kind of like similar to like AJ almost, like when AJ rocked up in the Rumble and people were like, "Oh my God, I never thought I'd see AJ Styles in WWE." Like it was similar then for Flair.
you know what? Like that was when we put the question on. It's fair to mention, going back to our top 10 briefly, when we put the question on Instagram, that was one of the popular ones, wasn't it? It was AJ's debut, which I think's fair. I know it didn't make our list, but that would have been that is another good moment. For me, it was ruined by the fact that we didn't pan away from Rowan's fucking face, but whatever, it was still good.
Yeah, I definitely marked out for that. To be fair, but yeah, so I think obviously we saw that Hogan spat his dummy out, and if I'm not going to win, then you're not allowed to win, Sid, and then Flair kind of capitalized on it and ended up winning the match, much to Bobby the Brain Heenan's delight on commentary. And then what we got to see, which we never get to see anymore, was like a post match interview. And for me, this is
Yeah, I quite like that idea. I think that's something they should definitely
this
do more.
this was just incredible. Like it's still one of the best things about the whole show, where like the promo he cuts afterwards, where he was just like, because he came into the WWF because he owned the WCW title, or the NWA title it was at the time, and that's why he came in as the real world's champion, because he had that belt. And then he was there saying, "I've been here calling myself the real world champion. This is all that matters. And I stand here with a tear in my eye," and stuff like that. And it was just an incredible promo. And you've got fucking Mr. Perfect and Bobby
This
Heenan.
is one that you've quoted to me
Yeah.
a few times, that or elements of that
Oh
promo.
God,
To
yeah.
be
It was
fair,
just so good. And just like the raw passion from Flair with like mixed with Perfect and Heenan just loving it in the background and laughing and hugging each other and stuff. And then even those two getting on it and they're like, "We're not the kind of guys to say we told you so, but we told you so." And like they're like loving it and stuff. And it's so funny because obviously Heenan's been shitting himself the whole time thinking he's never gonna win. He's there going, "We told you so."
yeah.
But yeah, just the whole thing. I just love it. There's never been a Rumble like it again. Obviously, this was the only one at the time, for a long time, where the WWE title's on the line. I think it's only ever happened once again, hasn't it? And that's when Triple H booked himself to win it off Roman Reigns. And the
Yes.
champion was
Yeah.
actually in the match, whereas in this example, the title was vacant, and it was just whoever won it was going to win the belt. So, yeah, I thought, yeah, definitely for me, it's the best Rumble that's ever happened, really. And is there any
Yep.
other takeaways that you've got from it versus kind of today's product, or do you agree? Do you think it is one of the better Rumbles, or?
Well, to be honest, I don't think it's hard for me to say. Like, it's definitely an amazing Rumble, right? I'd struggle to say the best, and that's just from my perspective of like, I think probably quite a bit was
Mm,
lost on me in a lot of senses because I wasn't like a big mark for a lot of the characters in a lot of senses. But there's so many attributes and so many things in this Rumble that I'm like, I kind of wish they'd do that now. I wish they'd pull in
mm,
elements now. Like one of the examples you gave them was the aftermatch interview. Imagine if they'd done that last year with Drew and they let him have a moment to talk about it. Something he's been like gunning for ever since. I know it was not so much winning the belt; it was the title shot. But the concept of doing that after that after match thing, they could have done it at Mania.
mm.
Do you know what I mean? But like just certain little elements, I'd love to see commentators be so like it helps you get into something, doesn't it, when they're so enthused about what's going on. And again, I love the fact that this is probably the problem with WWE now that we've mentioned a few times about long term storytelling. Not to coin a phrase for bitter fans, but like because there's long term storytelling, they were able to put a lot of that story into the Rumble. So then a lot of things made sense. Like a lot of people didn't like each other for various reasons. Like you mentioned, it was unexpected that Piper helped out
Mhm.
Rick, and then that made that betrayal funnier because that was exactly what you'd expect, and so on. Like just little elements like that. That like the character work was so good for those people then that it kind of makes me sad looking at today's product and going, well, there's no real long term hatreds. There's no stories that aren't. You get weird spectrum of like these two have had 100 matches and we're done, or these two have never really had any matches and we've randomly thrown it together. There's just not, it's not the same in that sense. But I'd love a Rumble match where there's just so much content in terms of story and character work. So on that standard, I'm like, yeah, this is one of the best fucking Rumbles for that.
If
But
Anthony,
yeah,
if
I
I
don't,
was to
it's
put
just
you right here on the spot right now, well, if we were
okay.
to do a follow-up, I'd do another Rumble rewind. What Rumble would you
Okay.
bring to the table?
Oh,
I appreciate I put you on the
I'll
spot.
be on. It is on the spot. I would, and this isn't. I don't have a. I can't give you the specific Rumble if you know what I mean. Where I'm like, oh, this one because of that. I would love to sort of rewind back to one that was like my early days of the Rumble, because I've not seen them in a while, so I'd struggle to remember them. And some of the bits I remember are kind of random, like that time that Undertaker just beat the shit out of Maven for accidentally eliminating her and stuff like that. It's like, that shouldn't be the memorable bit, but that's kind of one of the things
Yeah.
I remember. So like I'm thinking something in the early 2000s would be fun to rewind back to, because I'd have a lot of memories from it that'd come back. And I know that's probably not the answer you're looking for, because you probably wanted a specific one. But for me, I'm like, I'd be interested to do that comparison for something that I actually watched at the time as well.
Definitely.
Did
you
so
like, were you into it properly in 2000? So that was the one when we had The Rock and the Big Show with the final two, and there was a bit of controversy over that.
I'll be honest, like, I was probably a bit more of a poser at the time. Like I was getting into it, but like it was so big when we were in high school. Like everyone fucking loved it. And I was probably getting into it because I'm like, what's this everyone's going on about? So I probably did. I may have watched it, but I don't remember it very strongly. You'd probably be I'd probably be thinking more 2002 would be like when I was at my peak of what, like, oh, well, that's when I got into it, and I can probably remember a lot more of it in that sense.
Yeah, we'll have to pick one of them. I'm trying to think now. So we had obviously Rock and Big Show in 2000, and in 2001 was Stone Cold and Kane with the final two. 2002 was obviously when
This guy,
Perfect came back.
hang on, you're up there. This guy
It was
is remembering
Perfect
everything.
came back, and I think it was which then Triple H returned, wasn't it? After doing his was it after doing his quad? I think. So I think it was Angle or Triple H.
Triple H come back in 2000, didn't he? No, 2001 wasn't he?
I think.
Triple H.
Yeah, so
Was
I think that was his.
I remember him coming back. But
yeah, I mean, definitely,
but that was around the time I
I'm
started.
down for watching some of them again at some point, even if obviously post Rumble on the run up to Mania or something. But yeah, defo. But I appreciate you watching.
We can even
watching my favorite Rumble.
No, that's fair. And if I had a favorite, I know you'd watch it for me. But and you know what? We can always put the question out there as well. Maybe not for the next one. Maybe the next one I'll have a look through and make a selection, and then we've both picked one. But I'm thinking maybe we could put it out there as well and say what Rumble Rewind would people like to hear or see and talk about.
Let the people decide.
The people,
the millions.
But no, I can totally see why you think this is your your favorite Rumble. It was definitely a fucking quality one, in all fairness.
Awesome, man.
And I was never that big on Rick, if I'm honest with you, and this actually helped me with that, because again, the Rick I knew was more like coming back because he now owns WCW or whatever the fuck they did with that whole, the way they finished the invasion angle was he now partly owns WWE or some shit. And then they moved into Evolution and all that sort of stuff. That's the Rick I remember, and I was always like, everyone makes a fucking big deal of this guy, and I'm really not sure why. But seeing some of the stuff that was probably, I don't know if this was prime or maybe sort of heading out of his prime, but he was certainly a lot more at his prime than what I've fucking seen him. So it helped me a little bit understand why people love Rick so much, in all fairness, especially that impassioned promo at the end, like you say.
No, definitely. He's definitely one of the GOATs, and I think if you've only ever seen his kind of later WWE run, then yeah, he's definitely some stuff to see.
Yeah. And if you've definitely, guys, if you've become a fan of WWE in the last like 3 years, and all you've ever seen Rick do is come out to the ring and cry, I highly recommend you watch some of his older stuff. He does more than that.
I mean, even in his promo, he says, "with a tear in my eye," so he's crying in that as well, to be fair. But no, I appreciate you taking the time to watch it, and we appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to us talk about it. And hopefully, if you haven't seen it already, as Anthony's just said, then definitely want to check out. I think if you're a newer fan, then definitely worthwhile checking out on the WWE Network for $9.99 or $4.99 on
$9.99.
Peacock. So yeah, check it out.
Check it out.
And we'll be back after these messages. We keep saying it, we got no messages, but we'll be back.
So we'll be back after these messages.
Oh, you texted me? Thanks. See you in a minute.